begins now. You're listening to the What Why Now podcast with DJ Scottos. DJ Scottos presents What Why Now podcast.
Welcome to the DJ Scottos What Why Now podcast, where I'll be inviting special guests onto my show to ask them questions about their life and success stories. For this episode, I've invited another special guest. We'll be finding out what it was like growing up in the Medway in Kent, how he got into coaching, what it was like managing Gillingham Ladies, the challenges of non-league football, running his own consultancy, and the ups and downs for being a manager coach, plans for the future, plus much more. I am really excited to introduce our very special guest today. Let's make some virtual noise for Hugo Langton.
Thank you for the lovely welcome, Scott.
Thank you so much for joining the podcast. So how are you?
I'm very well, thanks, my friend. How are you?
Not bad, not bad. On a Monday, being a coach or a manager, what is your normal kind of day? What would it be a Monday would be like?
Normally our week will look, we train Monday, Tuesday, unless we play Tuesday night. We have Wednesday off and train Thursday, Friday, play Saturday. But there's a slight change. This is an unusual week, just because of some stuff we need to do around club media and things like that, with the season starting next week. So the schedule's changed as a one-off this week, which is why I'm free today. But generally I'd be in today.
Yeah.
So a little bit of a different week.
So what time would you normally get up and start, and how would a normal Monday be then if it was a normal week? What would you be doing at this time?
Well, this current club I'm at, Aldershot Town, I get up about 5:30, and I leave the house around about 6:15, 6:30. And then so look to get into work before 8.
Right.
So the players will come in from 9:30, and then we start training at 10:15. So it's always important that all the staff are in there early so we can talk about what we need to talk about.
Yeah. Wow. And then did you do more than one? Is it like 2 sessions a day, or is it one?
No, never, mate. No, never. We only ever do one session a day. There's a lot of chat around this. I mean, a lot of clubs in pre-season, they do 2 sessions a day, but wherever I've worked, I've always insisted that we only do one. So that way your one session is of really, really high quality. And what you'll see is that you'll see a lot of clubs, they do 2 sessions a day. They tend to start off really, really well in the first month, and then they hit the buffers, and that's why you enter what they call sacking season for management teams, because they peak too early.
So I'd like to do a few bit of icebreaker ones. If there was a movie made of you, of your life, what would it be, and who would play you? What would it be about, and who would play you?
Well, that's a great question. Who's widely known as the best looking guy on the planet? Whoever that is would have to play me. I joke, of course.
Jason Statham, maybe, or
if people around me would probably suggest, like, who's the bloke who plays Phil Mitchell or someone like that.
If you was to write an autobiography, what would the title be of the book?
The title was I've led a very differing life, very different stages of my life, doing different things. Some crazy at times and other times.
I guess the book's not finished yet, is it? So it's like
it would
more
probably
chapters to come.
It'd probably have football somewhere in the title.
Do you think you'd ever do a book?
Maybe I'd have to wait until I was fully retired, because if I start calling people out, which I would do, I think I'd probably find it quite hard to work. So maybe never say never, but like you say, like the book's nowhere near its end anyway.
Well, hopefully the podcast will be a start of your book anyway. If you could invite 3 people to dinner, living, dead, fictional or real, who would they be?
Well, the first one without doubt would be Rick Mail. Ever since I loved him ever since I first saw the young ones in the 1980s, and the guy made me laugh all the way through my life. I'd probably then also invite, so when I say Barry Humphries, who's recently departed, sadly, but he'd have to come as his character, so Les Patterson, the Australian diplomat. So there's 2 people to make me laugh. It's funny because I'm not really a massive fan of his in terms of his music, but I felt that he led an interesting life, was probably Elvis. As I said, I'm not really a fan of his music, some of it, but we all know some of his songs. So
you didn't mention one person in football, actually, which I thought it might have been a manager or a player. Is that just because like you've It's just because obviously you do your football, but when you're outside of football, is it just like you kind of switch off?
If you look through my phone, I'd say 95% of the people in my contacts are football people.
Right.
But I appreciate the 5% more, probably, because, it's nice to go out, whether it be for a beer or for a meal, with people that are like not necessarily have anything to do with football or know anything about it. I mean, my wife's great. She hates it, so I never have to come home and answer questions. Because generally where you work, it's very rare you work on your doorstep. So by the time you drive home after a game, whether you won, drawn, lost, you've slowed your brain down. So by the time I get to my front door, whether, I walk in my front door and, I'm dad.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask that next, actually. What are you like if you lose a game?
I'm a very, very calm person. The first thing to do when we lose is you've got to think, well, okay, well, why did we lose? And so the first thing I do is I check myself. Was our preparation correct? Did we give the players the right information? Was training right? Was the content within training, was that right? So you start with yourself as a staff.
Yeah.
If you're a manager, I know managers themselves, they feel slightly different because it's their name above the door and they feel that they've got the weight of the world on your shoulders. So being an assistant, slightly different. And I've noticed when I've been a manager or an interim manager, it's really, really weird because the game starts and you feel like the whole stadium is looking at you. They're not. They're looking at the players.
Yeah.
But it's funny how you feel differently if you're the actual gaffer, as it were. So the manager that I've worked with a lot and who I'm working with at the moment, he'll I know he's the same. He'll go home and he'll have some fun. He's got a big family, or he'll go out for a drink or a meal, whatever. And I think that's really, really important. And the thing is that if you take things personally, or you get really up or down about something, it also then clouds your thinking for what's coming next. So as soon as one game's finished, regardless of the outcome, sure, we have a debrief, whatever way that may roll into Sunday as well. But very quickly you start to have to think about the next game.
Yeah.
The next opponent, what's training going to be like on Monday morning? What do we need to do? Have we got all the information? I might spend a lot of my Sunday watching whoever we're playing next, watching their last 2 or 3 games, things like that. So you've got to move on really quickly. And if you dwell on stuff, it can affect your decision making and your thinking. So that's how I look at it anyway.
Yeah. Last question. If you were Prime Minister, what would be the first thing you would change?
It would be to do with the way people drive on the motorways, lorry drivers, van drivers, so-called professional drivers who just create chaos. Someone who's on the motorways pretty much every day. I'd see so much potential carnage and ignorance, and it drives me mad. But it's the van drivers and the lorry drivers in particular. I mean, they cause mayhem.
What do you do when you're driving all over the place to different away grounds and stuff? It's like hours and hours in a coach. What do you actually do when you're on there?
Well, there's a couple of answers to that. So, like when I go into training, I meet the gaffer on the way.
Right.
So I'm not on my own for very long. Right. Yeah. And same at the previous club, I was probably on my own for 45 minutes. So I'm generally with him. Yeah. So obviously we talk a lot about the team and stuff. If I'm on my own, varies really. Sometimes I listen to Talk Sports. Sometimes I listen to podcasts. Sometimes if it's 4 o'clock in the morning and I'm trying to stay awake, I blast out really loud, heavy metal music just to keep me going, keep me awake.
I want to start by going back when you were a child, where you sort of grew up, for example. So I understand you're from the Medway in Kent. What was it like kind of growing up there for you?
Well, I was lucky. I mean, I had a comfortable upbringing. There was always food on the table and stuff like that. But yeah, Gillingham and the Medway towns itself is an interesting place. Yeah. I often say it's twinned with a war zone, but I mean, look, I was no different to a lot of other kids. I love football. I live for football. I love music. I've got 3 older brothers and sisters, and my mum loves music. So there's always music in my house of all different types, all different things. So I up until about the age of 12, 11, 12, when I went to secondary school, I had no issues. So I was never really settled at school. The only thing that kept me going was football.
Yeah.
The fact of, like, I remember when I was 15, it was unusual. I was playing for the school under 19s, things like that. So the football kept me going. But when I was at school, I remember there was like a teacher, like he'd punish you, but he thought it was a punishment. He was a maths teacher. He'd send you running, go and run around the school, 3 times and then come back here. So I deliberately misbehaved in class because I was happy to run. So I probably spent more time running around the school than I did in the classroom, which suited me down to the ground. But I was purely interested in football and to an extent music.
Your brothers and sisters, did you say they were all older than you?
Yeah, I'm the youngest. Yeah.
So just going to say that, but how did they affect your life in some way?
Well, to be fair, my oldest sister, she was great, and she still is. I mean, I remember she used to take me on holiday and things like that. We go over to Spain for a week and just mess around and have fun. My brother, to be fair to him, he lives in Bulgaria, but he's never been around a lot. He's always kind of been away.
Right.
But I have a good bond with my brother, and same with my other sister. Like our dad passed away last year, and it actually brought us closer together.
Right.
So we speak a lot more and stuff, but we're all dotted around. Obviously we've all got our own lives and jobs and whatever. But yeah, I wouldn't say they had a great deal of influence on me. My oldest sister, possibly because she was more present, certainly in my teenage years.
Yeah. Do you have like a favourite childhood memory?
I'm probably going to mention my dad here, only because obviously, as I said, we lost him last year, and he was never really into football or anything really. He liked watching football. He was a so-called Chelsea fan, but when I was young, he took me to watch Gillingham play, and so obviously they became my team. But yeah, like my dad would always get up. I'd probably look back on it, and my dad used to get up every morning with me, and he'd make me breakfast and stuff, and we'd have a bit of a laugh. So I used to really, I really used to treasure. Looking back, I know I used to really treasure those moments with him. My mum, like, she's great. I mean, she's still with us. She, to be fair to her, wherever I generally kicked a football, she turned up to watch.
Right.
And she used to always say the same thing to me, as a kid, and even now as an adult. And I think I say it to my own kids. If you say, "Oh, I can't do something," she'd always say to me, "There's no such thing as can't."
Yeah.
And they're very great words. They are, wise.
Yeah, they are. Actually, what they are, that is powerful words.
Very, very simple. But she made me believe that I could do anything.
Yeah. And do you know what? I was going to ask this question, but it's probably quite an obvious one. But if I was to ask your mum, like, how would she describe what you do for a living?
It's really interesting because this is almost like a contrast to what I've just told you about her. But my mum and dad were very, very against me playing football. Aspirations to be a professional footballer, but whether I was good enough, I don't think I was. But there was times where I think I was 16, and Maidstone United, who were a league team at the time, they wanted to. They were interested in signing me as a YTS apprentice, and my parents wanted nothing to do with it. And they were strong in education, which I also understand, but unfortunately I wasn't. So they kind of tried to put up a lot of barriers with me playing football. And it's only really like my dad was always like, in his later years, well, a lot of it he was like, "Why are you doing that?" But as he got older, he actually became quite supportive of it and always wanted to know how the team were doing. My mum follows my team wherever I'm at religiously, as does my father-in-law, by the way. I mean, he lives in North Wales, and I know he sits there every Saturday at 3:00, refreshing his score feed, So, and when we're on the telly, he's always watching it, and he texts me after games. So listen, they're great, and. But my mum, yeah, it was hard for her because my dad had dementia.
Right.
So she had to look after him, and wherever I worked was always a little bit too far away from her. But now she's got a little bit of freedom back because she doesn't have to care for my dad now. So where I'm at in Aldershot is probably about 40 minutes down the road from where she lives. So she's looking forward to coming to watch Aldershot a bit this season. So that'd be really nice.
Other than your parents, who is the most influential person in your life, and how did they impact you?
There was a moment in 2016, okay, a really good friend of mine, he's called Andy Driscoll. You know, he was insisting that I joined him on a day of coaching education in Cambridge. And, you know, at this point in 2016, I've been coaching for 10 years. You know, like I thought, oh, I know what I'm doing. I'm good at this. I'm whatever, you know. But he insisted I went on this course with him. And I went into a lecture hall at Anglia Ruskin University in Cambridge, where a guy called Raymond Verheyen, who's a Dutch coach, delivered a day of coach education. And it was a real big day for me, because I got back in my car at the end of it, and I look, you know, you just looking in the rearview mirror, and I looked at myself and I thought, man, you're a shit coach. Sorry for swearing.
Wow, that's fine.
I realized I was a really, really, really bad coach, and this guy had shown me the mirror and made me conscious of it. And so since 2016, the only coach education that I will ever pay for is with Raymond Verheyen, because the guy is, every year, I feel that he raises my bar higher and higher each year, you know. So that guy, in terms of my coaching career, he's the only guy who showed me the mirror and made me realize, hey man, you're not very good at all.
Yeah. Wow. God. Well, it shows you, doesn't it? Like it just, it's like that closing door, or like, you know, a moment like where that could have, yeah.
And that's why my friend had been to it. Andy, that's why he wanted me to go, because he knew what was going to happen. And so now it's 2023. So for the last 7 years, I am continually educated by this guy, whether it be online or in person.
Talking about coaching, we worked together. That's how we know each other at Informa.
It's a long time ago.
20 odd years ago. And together at Informa, we were very lucky to have I did the podcast with Peter Rigby, a CEO that was amazing CEO, but also was very sporty as well, and was very generous, and also did a lot of football, golf, cricket, etc. But when we were playing together, were you doing any coaching at that point?
No. So the truth is this, right? I mean, I had to stop playing football when I was about 20 years old. I really, really badly pulled my hamstring, right, in my left hamstring. And I just couldn't recover. And I'd been hod carrying and all sorts of stuff back then, right? And I had to stop playing, and it hurt me a lot. But what I could do, I could play once a week, because it would take me the whole week to recover. But I just wanted to play, so I put myself through the mill once a week. And I was actually playing in a game one Thursday night somewhere in southeast London, somewhere near Bermondsey. And the referee was a guy called Leroy Ambrose, who used to play for Charlton. Now, I was always a number 9 when I played football growing up, and, you know, until I had to stop playing. But I started to play centre half. So it was towards my late 20s. I was playing centre half. But, you know, and he said to me after the game, he said, are you a coach? And I said, no. He said, you should think about it. And I said, why? He said, because the way that you see the game, and the information, you talk to people, you're very good communicator, you're very clear with your explanations. So I thought, okay. I thought about it, and my wife, who we weren't married then, so I was about 30 at this point, she encouraged it as well. So I started to do my coaching badges. So that's kind of how I got into it. And so around about that time, I was an Informer as well. So so I started at Informer I think it was maybe 2001, and I left in 2009.
Right.
But I started coaching around 2006. So in my head, I was always thinking to myself, I had a plan, because I started to go through my badges, and I realized around I did my UEFA B license that the feedback that I was getting from the tutors on the course was that, you know, you're actually quite good at this, which is unusual for them to say as well, because I know the person who told me that would usually dismiss someone like me because I wasn't a former professional.
Yeah.
Okay? But he encouraged me, and he said, listen, normally when you finish your B license, you have to wait 1 year to do, at least 1 year to do your A license. So he encouraged me to go and do my A license straight away. He said, you're ready for it, just go and do it. All right. So in my head, once I got my UEFA A license, that's when I knew I had a better opportunity of leaving the office and going into football. So it's what I had planned to do towards, the last few years I was Informer. And Informer, to be fair, I mean, there's a lot of things I could say about Informer, but one thing that they were very good with me at, the people that I work with, is that obviously I was in non-league football at this point, and they didn't have a problem if I left early on a Tuesday to get to a game, wherever I was coaching at the time. So that was fine with that. But yeah, so it's probably the latter part of my time at Informer, I'd say, last few years. The unit that I worked in, we had a very, very clear collective intention, which us all as individuals with individual intentions, we all fed into it. We all knew what we were doing, and we were all going for the same end goal. And that's why we were so successful. Having worked at a lot of different football clubs, the clearer the collective intention, and everybody is driving the bus in the same direction together or rowing in the same boat, the more chance you have of success. That's clear. But as soon as you've got people going, well, I want to do this, no, but I think we should do that. Yeah, but I want to do that. Then you've got a problem, because it's all over the place, and there's no real structure to it. It's chaotic.
Because there's so many things that were good on there. We could probably talk.
I was lucky. I worked with some great people, and I every day I just laughed just because of the people that were around me. One chap in particular, I'm going to give him a mention, called Laurie Homan. He was the funniest. He still is. The guy cracks me up, but he's one of the funniest people I've ever met.
So let's get into your football career, right? So from what I understand, your first real job was that the Gillingham Ladies team?
What I was doing, right? Because I started my coaching badge, and I actually was coaching my friend's under-12 girls team in Gravesend. Then I helped another friend of mine with an under-15 team in just outside Gillingham. But what I did, and obviously I was unconscious of it at the time, being as a Gillingham fan, I went and found a guy. I went and found him out and sought him, and I found him, a guy called Steve Lovell. Steve Lovell used to play for Gillingham. He was like a Gillingham legend, number 9. And he was a non-league manager, but he was in charge of Gillingham in the community. So what I did with him, and I said, look, I've got a really good idea, right? And he went, what's that? I said, you give me a Gillingham tracksuit, right? And I'm going to go on Saturday mornings when Gillingham are playing at home. I'll go and be a guest coach on behalf of Gillingham to whoever wants me to do it. I said, and I said, then the club can give me some tickets, and those that want to come to the game in the afternoon can. So Steve thought it was quite a good idea. And I met the chairman, Paul Scally, and to be fair to Paul, he was happy to give the tickets. So I got to be known a little bit at this point at Gillingham. The Gillingham Ladies thing came round, and so I got that. I did that for a year, but then I wanted to go into men's football. So my plan was always like, no one knows who I am, so I need to start at the bottom. So I took a job at a place called Rust Hall, with very, very the lowest tier you can get in non-league football, and so I thought I'm going to go there. And so in the end of my first season, I think we finished the highest it had ever been in the 103-year history at that time.
Wow.
And but so in the second season, in the pre-season, there were some things that I felt were promised to me that weren't delivered, and I just thought, you know what, I'm not going to do this. But I'd met a guy called Tony Beckingham, who again is a great friend of mine to this day, and I went with him to another club in the league above. And after 10 games, we were top. We shouldn't have been, but we won 9 out of the first 10 games, and so we were top of the league. And then I got a phone call from Steve Lovell. So that's why me seeking him out was important. And Steve offered me a job to be his assistant manager, upper level again. So I stayed with Steve for a while, and he was brilliant, Steve. And again, I still know Steve very well to this day. And just from there, I realised it was about networking, getting to know people. I was always trying to get my name about, because no one knew who I was. So I tried to use specific local journalists and things like that, or people I knew ran non-league websites to talk about me. So, which obviously really helped me as well. But I floated around like the lower, like how non-league football. So the division I'm in, I don't think it's non-league, where everyone's professional, right? So you've got, it's called Step 1, which is where we're at. So the league above us is the EFL 2. Then you've got Step 2, Step 3, Step 4, Step 5. So I was at Step 4 with Steve, And then I floated around steps 3 and 4 for quite a while. And I had a chance meeting with a guy called Mark Goldberg, who was the manager of Bromley.
Yeah.
And the club I was at the time, he was very friendly with the manager, and we were playing an away game at a club called Kingstonian, and Mark had come to the game. And the manager said to me, look, Mark's just hanging around, I've said it's okay for him to be in the change room in case he can help us. So at half time, I delivered the half time because the manager was a player. So I took half time, and Mark liked the way that I spoke. And at the end of that season, Mark offered me the job as his first team coach at Bromley. So I'd gone to step 2. All right. And we won step 2. I left Bromley, and then I met a guy. By the way, I'm still great friends with Mark to this day as well. This is an important thing, networking, your relationship with people. But I left Bromley and I was out of work for a little bit, and I was at a game and I met a guy called Tommy Widrington, who had been the manager of Eastbourne Borough. So we'd played against Eastbourne at Bromley. So we kind of knew each other. And Tommy, to his credit, he invited me. He knew I was out of work. And I didn't know at the time, but he was looking to add to his coaching staff. And he clearly tested me because he said, come down and see me in the training ground, be there at 8 a.m. So I was there obviously at 7:45. He then sent me to watch a game to document a report. So he was testing my knowledge of football. So I sent him the report, and then he offered me a job. And meeting Tom has been great because he's a guy I've worked with on and off now for 8 years, and we have got a good working football relationship. To answer the question you asked earlier about influences and stuff like that, Tom's been great and still is to this day. He's a great manager and a great person to work for and with, because you actually get on with your job.
Just some questions I had on non-league. So for you mentioned this quite a lot: relationships, networking. And not burning bridges, I guess, is a big thing, because obviously it can come back and, like you say, it goes around in circles. Somehow you could end up being assistant coach. New manager comes in, you might have had a bad relationship with him or whatever. That can happen. What would you say about non-league then? Because you moved and it looks like you've always been doing that, been going up. How hard is it to make that decision to even though you might be in the second or third, what do you call it, tier or
steps?
And there's a potential to go to step 2. How hard is that? Because it's like going to a new school, right, and being the new guy. You might have a few relationships, but how does that work? And how do you make that decision?
It depends. I mean, listen, I've turned down so many jobs over the years, not because I'm arrogant or anything like that. I just know that I'd be wasting my time going to a specific club. So for me, again, it's how do they see my role? What do they expect from me? And if that doesn't suit me, I won't go.
Yeah.
Simple as that. It's not just about going up levels or maybe earning a little bit more money. It's not about that, because I've worked, particularly in the earlier parts of my career, I worked with they're nice people, all right, but once it comes to training or matches, they're different people.
Yeah.
And I found that a bit weird, So someone like Tommy Widrington, it's been fairly easy for me. So obviously I was at Eastbourne with him. Then I worked, he was the head of recruitment at Coventry City, then the director of football at Bristol Rovers. And it was quite a funny story, really, because I was at Welling and I shouldn't have been at Welling. What happened was, this is about 2 and a bit years ago. Welling had funny enough, Steve Lovell, again, was the manager of Welling, and he resigned.
Right.
Just as the season begun. Mark Goldberg, who I've mentioned before, he was the owner of Welling, and he rang me and said, look, can you help me? Because can you just take training for me this week? I said, yeah, no problem.
Right.
All right. So I had no intention of being at Welling. But so he said, look, I just need you to take training until I can get a manager in. I said, no problem at all. So I think it was like the third training session. Peter Taylor turned up, the former England manager, to become the manager. So Peter and I took training together, and I thought, this is nice. I'd met Peter a couple of times. And he said to me at the end of the training session, he said, listen, he goes, I'm planning on bringing in my own assistant. I said, yeah, no problem. I said, look, this is your gig, Peter. I've got no intention of being here. I've only been here just as a favour to Mark. I said, it's your gig. You do what you want with it. He went, no. He goes, I'm bringing someone in, but I want you to stick around. So I said, okay, because I'm thinking, what's Peter Taylor? I thought it'd be really interesting to spend some time with him, just as a student more than anything else, right? Yeah. So for the next 2 months, I was at Welling, and my relationship with Peter became brilliant. I learned to trust him very quickly, but more importantly, he learned to trust me very, very quickly. But Welling was part-time, so we were in Tuesday mornings, Thursday mornings, and I was on the training ground with Peter, and Tommy Widrington kept ringing me. And I answered it through my watch. I went, Tom, leave me alone. I'll ring you after training. Right. So I've got in the car and I'm driving back, and I rang Tom. I went, what's so important? He went, I'm on my way to Norfolk. I went, what are you doing that for? He goes, I'm going to King's Lynn. I went, where's that? He went, Norfolk. And he said, I'm going to go and meet the chairman. And I went, why? He went, because I think they want me to be their manager. I went, okay. He said, if I get it, will you come with me? I said, sure. So anyway, nothing. I didn't speak to Tom again for the rest of the day. And then I went to bed about 11, and I got up at 6 o'clock the next morning, and I had like 97 missed calls from Tom at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Wow. So
I rang him, like it's about 6:05 in the morning. I went, what do you want? Right. And he said, I'm the manager of King's Lynn. So can you come to training today? I went, no, I can't. And we were playing Dover the next day. So I had to then leave Welling. And both Peter and Mark Goldberg were so good about it, So I actually now say to people, if I, want to big Tom up, I left an England manager to go and work with you,
Wow.
But that's how highly I think of Tom. And I just enjoy working for him. There's nothing against Peter. I mean, what a great guy, And I feel very lucky that I got to spend the time that I did with him.
It was mad to see that he came as an owner and then suddenly became a manager at Bromley, and now he's back at owner at Welling. So
He did. Mark Goldberg delivered the best speech I've ever heard in the changing room. Right, we were with 2 games of the season left, and we were top of the league. We had to win 1 game to win the league, right? And we were at home to Weston-super-Mare. And Mark walked into the changing room at around about 1:45, and all the lads are sitting there, and you could feel that the tension a little bit, because hey, listen, if we win, we're champions. Yeah. And Mark said the greatest thing ever. He looked at the players and went, are you lot worried, nervous, stressed? And a lot of them went, yeah. He went, why? He went, one day I had 40 million quid and the next day I didn't. Because that stress, the whole place just erupted with laughter. And like we were 2-0 up after 20 minutes. Do you know what I mean? And Mark, got to credit Mark with that. He said the best thing at that he could have said at that moment. Listen, Mark's an amazing guy. Do you know what, right? Even now, I mean, Mark's in his 50s. And he has this amazing thing where he wakes up every single morning and he believes today's his day. Wow. He's going to have the best day of his life. But he feels like this every morning when he wakes up. That's what he thinks. And isn't that an amazing trait to have? And he's had so many kicks and the balls over his life, but he keeps getting up and going on. And he still believes today's going to be the greatest day ever. And I think that's an amazing trait for someone to have.
So I get a couple more questions along these sides. Obviously, we hear a lot of stuff about there's not enough money coming down through the Premier League. What's been the biggest challenge that you've had? I know you mentioned about you moved clubs and stuff, but that seems like been a success, right?
Well, I've been at clubs where people haven't been paid. And that's really hard because people are not talking about football at training. They're talking about money. What normally happens is during the season, if you go into a club, it's because something's wrong and they've sacked the manager, or the manager's done really, really well and gone on to something better. But it tends to be the first one, that something's wrong, and that's always the biggest challenge. So, for example, when we went into King's Lynn, what we found was a very toxic, not very toxic, but there were certain toxic individuals within the changing room. The team had no identity whatsoever. They were bottom of the league. They'd had 7 points from 20 games.
Wow.
Yeah, in the National League. So step 1. And we're obviously going to get relegated. So on the very first match, and I met the players 1 hour before kickoff, we played Dover in front of 417 fans, which is poor. Yeah. Right. So then how do you then go from, how do you turn that around? Yeah. Well, you have to, first of all, you've got to allow all the problems to come to the surface. You need to realize who you need to get rid of. which isn't always the easiest thing to do because they're under contract, right? And then how do you make it better? So let me put it this way. So I walked in and had all these problems, and we played Dover in front of 417 people. When I left Kings Lynn, there was over 3,000 people at the last game I was at. So wow. We went from 400 people to 3,000, right? So we did something really good in the middle, and it was quite simple, really, because people think that to be successful, you need to have a lot of money, right? But one thing that Tommy Widrington has proved, shown, taught me, he goes, money isn't everything, right? It's about recruiting correctly, getting the right people in, right? And also being able to coach on the coaching pitch, on the training pitch, to be able to and have a clear identity and have a clear message and people to understand it. And then as a result, they buy into it. So at Kings Lynn, he got to the stage, but the changing room self-regulated. It ran itself. And it was amazing. And it's very, very unusual. But Tom had recruited that well that that's what it was like. And I'm starting to see some signs of it now at Aldershot, because again, in our league, there's people with way, way bigger budgets than us, way bigger resources than us. But the recruitment that we've done, well, it's hard to say because we've had 5 weeks of pre-season and the season starts on Saturday. We don't know what's going to happen, but it's all about getting value for your buck. So whether somebody earns 50 quid a week or 5 grand a week or 5 million a week in the Saudi leagues now, you've got to be value for money. And one thing that Tom has done very, very well is the recruitment. And so money isn't everything. It helps. But when you can't compete against the teams that have a lot of money. So when I was at Kings Lynn, we had a budget for the whole season, it was £440,000 for the whole season. You had Stockport County with 5 million, who won the division. Wrexham, I don't need to tell you about them. During that season, that's when the two Hollywood guys went in there. So there's huge gaps in terms of that. But I tell you what, though, we may have lost to Wrexham and Stockport, but we give them a hell of a game. Do you know what I mean? Which they wouldn't have done before we went in there. So it's all about your environment, and it's about recruiting well. In a business sense, it's about hiring good people, right? And creating an environment where everyone's got a voice, and you've got to be very, very shrewd with it. And that's one thing that Tom has done extremely well for me. Yeah, I've worked with Tom for 8 years now, but at the same time, if he moves to another club at some point in the future, I have no right to expect him to take me with him. That's his choice. Sometimes, and it wouldn't affect our, away from football friendship, because it's not about him looking after me or anything like that. Tom will hire me if he believes that I'm the right man for that job, to help him with that. He has the benefit, obviously, of knowing me very well, and he knows what I'm about and how I work as I do him. But he might move to a club where he can't bring any staff with him. Yeah. Or he might go in there and he go, do you know what? I like that guy. I don't need Langton. That's fine. That's the way that it is. But it's just as it's worked out so far, that's what it's been like, But it's not just me in there. We've got another guy with us at Aldershot called Richard Dryden. He's top notch, absolutely fantastic coach, great bloke. Our goalkeeping coach, Dave, he's again good character. The medical people, they're just good characters, and we all get on. So when I talk about the environment of the players, it's got to be the same in the staff as well, by the way. Yeah. So we all have the same collective intention, but we're all feeding into it with what we do individually. Do you see what I mean? So Tom's like the manager, and he makes the final decision, and it's great, but we all have a say, and whatever he decides, that's what he gets paid to do. Yeah. So he knows a little about everything we do, but we're more experts in what we do. So we're like subcontractors. He's a head contractor. Then at the end of it, the head contractor makes the final decision, and we all trust him and we all back it. That's how it works. Well, how it should work, in my opinion. At Kings Lynn, I actually never signed a contract.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But I was supposed to, and I had a verbal agreement with the chairman. And to be fair to him, he honoured our verbal agreement, as I did my end. At Aldershot, right now I've signed for 2 years. Right. Okay. But it just varies from club to club. Listen, if we do really well, they might extend our contracts earlier. I don't know. Yeah. If we do really badly, then obviously we're going to be out the door. Tom left with 6 games to go and went to Aldershot, right?
And did you stay on then? Did you just stay on and manage the team?
Well,
there
was a natural assumption that I was going to walk out as well,
right?
But again, that I didn't, because I hadn't even had a conversation with Tom about it. He just said, "Right, I've been offered this. I'm going to go and do this." Okay, if that's what you want to do. So I stayed for the rest of the season. I then made the decision myself that I was going to leave Kings Lynn because it's far away from home, and we hadn't had much of a social life because I wasn't getting home on Saturday nights until at least 9:30. I was just continually up north. Sometimes, I wouldn't be getting in even on a Saturday night till 1, 2, 3 in the morning. Wow. So it takes its toll on you as a person, but also it affects your family. So I'd made a decision that I'm going to leave Kings Lynn. It was all very amicable, not a problem at all. And it was about a week later, Tom rang me and said, "Do you want to come to Aldershot?" So I'd never pre-planned to go to Aldershot.
Yeah.
A lot of people won't believe me on that, and that's fine. But my plan all along was to honour my verbal agreement with Kings Lynn till the end of the season. Then I'd decide what I was going to do next.
So on the, say for example, we're looking ahead now, and what normally happens then with contracts and stuff? Like, for people that don't know, when do you start talking about a new contract? Does it always done at the end of the season? You talk about it because obviously, like you say, you got to plan your next move.
I've got right now. I don't need to talk about mine because mine's freshly signed, right? So I mean, if it could be, it varies from club to club to club, right? I mean, some people, if you do well in the first 6 months, they'll go, right, let's renegotiate your terms and we'll give you longer, right? Sometimes you'll do it like towards the end of a season. If they want to keep you on, then you discuss it then, but because I've always been an assistant, really, I've never really worried too much about it, and I've never really pushed for it because I figure they either want to keep me or they don't, right? And I've been very, very lucky that for somebody who didn't play professional football, I've survived a long time. So people will always, I like to think that someone will always give me something to do, whether it be coaching, assisting, scouting, whatever. Somebody will always give me something to do.
Right. Okay.
And that might sound a bit arrogant, and I don't wish it to be. I'm not an arrogant person. One thing that I understand, right, is that, like Tommy played, and the other guy I worked with, Richard, they both played in the Premier League, right? They're both Premier League footballers back in their day, okay? Now, if you're at the top if you're a Premier League football championship, it doesn't matter. If you're a professional footballer and you play hundreds and hundreds of games, you have a lot of knowledge, okay? Because you've worked with different managers or whatever, and you've seen lots of different things. The problem with it is that sometimes these people find it hard to communicate it. That's where their problem is, to be able to communicate effectively. So the way that I look at it is that there is generally a stigma towards people like me. Well, yeah, he never played professional football. But I work with people that have. Do you see what I mean? So they have different knowledge to me because they can, like Tommy rightly says to the players, he's walked a mile in their shoes as footballers and more. I haven't, all right? So, and I understand that, and I don't try and talk differently or be different. I understand and I accept it. But I guess because my knowledge and the way that I am obviously has benefits to whatever management team, I guess that's how I've got to look at it. But I don't worry too much about it. But I respect the fact that these guys have played in the Premier League. I mean, wow, how many people get to do that? Even play one game. That's one game more than everybody else, right?
Have you actually got an example of somebody that you've got that you knew that you might have seen at some point through their career and are now doing well at a big club? You've got a couple of examples of where you've been
I've worked with a lot. I've been lucky. I've worked with a lot of players who have gone that way, and I've worked with a lot of players who've towards the end of their career coming down. So in terms of players going that way, there's a few that have gone into League One Do you know what? We've got one or two players at the moment at Aldershot. I'm not going to name them.
Put too much pressure on them.
I swear to God, they shouldn't be here. They should be there, and I'll go there.
Yeah,
I know this 1,000,000%. All right. But yeah, I mean, there's some lads that have surprised me as well. Actually, there was one guy, and I don't mean this to be rude to him as well. There's a guy who was with me at Welling, and we sold him to Palace, funnily enough, and he's now at Accrington Stanley. He was very, very. He's called J. Rich Bagaloo. He was very centre defender, 6'5", but it was all about for him. It was all about having the ball, right? And he could play football all day long, but he never thought as a defender, ever.
Right.
And so I started living in his head, you know. I taught him how to defend his box properly. I taught him how to defend. Don't just think about having the ball, because that's how he was brought up. We sold him to Palace, and he's now at Accrington Stanley. So, and every now and then I'll text him, just literally just write to him, "Where's your man?" ?
Have you ever had a situation where you and the manager have just completely had a big bust up, or you've completely disagreed on something? Does that happen? Does that happen a lot? And how do you get over that to make it to get back on side together again? If that makes sense.
I find things, look back and think, I remember there was one club I was at, and we were in the early rounds of the FA Cup against a team in the league below us. And we were losing 3-0 after half an hour.
Right.
And I said to him, we were playing, I can't remember what formation we were playing, but I said to him, listen, you need to change the formation. And he went, why? I said, because if you change it to this, it means that these players will be higher, and it will stop them up there, which is where the ball was coming from all the time. So we've got a better chance of stopping it, which means we're higher up the pitch. So I give him an explanation, and he turned around to me. He told me to F off, and he said they should be changing their formation against us. We're the higher placed team. And I just went, wow, whatever, right? So then in the second half, he turns to me. He goes, I've got a really good idea. I went, all right. And he actually repeated what I'd said to him 40 minutes previously, right? And he changed it, and we ended up losing 3-2, right? So just think, but he rang me in the evening, to be fair, and apologised for his behaviour towards me. Tommy and I argue like cat and dog sometimes.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, yeah. We're not afraid of telling each other to F off, by the way. But we're men, and we choose not to be offended by it.
Yeah.
All right? Because all we're doing is just trying to improve each other, you know. And sometimes, we will tell each other to F off. That's life. But it doesn't mean that we fall out with each other. It doesn't change anything, because we choose not to let that happen. Yeah. Listen, anything that whatever Tom says, I back it up, and the rest of the staff, we back it up 1,000,000%. We're very, very united.
How often do players fight in training? Sometimes
a player can have a go at another player because his standard's not good enough, when it should be better, and they both know that. And if the player might tell them to F off or whatever, you know, and they might. But no, I've never really felt the need to go and break something up. Sometimes it's good. Like sometimes it's good to hear the players, particularly at half time before we go in to talk to them. I can hear them having a go at each other, and that's great, because they're only trying to get more out of each other. It's not offensive. You know, like let's start a fight, kind of having a go at each other. Yeah. And basically saying what you're doing is not good enough. Yeah. And that's a good thing. But it never boils over. I mean, I've rarely seen it.
Players have you had to sign first language isn't English, and secondly, how hard is it for someone to get into into the team and understand how you play and fit in? Is that quite a hard job for you and for them?
Not really. No, I mean, we've got one lad at the moment. He's Albanian Swiss, and he's a new player. And but to be fair, I mean, he's been in England for a few years, so his English is pretty good. You know, but it's like anything. It's like it doesn't make any real difference, because as long as you understand, you know, their culture, their background, there might be some things that is important to them. You know. Players, if I'm honest with you, don't care. He's either a good lad or he isn't. He's a good lad, it doesn't matter where you're from, as far as the players are concerned, and they'll bring you in, and, you know, but I remember at Eastbourne, we had a lad on trial who was Spanish, who couldn't speak any English.
Right.
And so Tommy's in the session and he's talking, and this Spanish lad's looking at me, and I'm literally, because I can speak Spanish, I'm translating what Tom's saying
Okay, that's good.
into Spanish, right? And the lads were all looking at me going, what's going on here, right? But that was that was probably the only time. But no, most of the time it's not really an issue. I think you just got to make sure that, I mean, I've had players obviously in the past that they respect Ramadan, right. and that's a challenge, because obviously they can't eat in certain parts of the day, from while the sun's up, right? So then you have to find ways of supporting them. So we had one player last season, so we were away. I can't remember who it was, but we were in a hotel on a Friday night. But I had arranged for the hotel staff to feed him at 5 a.m. before the sun came up, so he could stuff his face, so he could eat well at night, and he'd also then had a lot to eat early. Do you see what I mean? So it's just understanding these things and just making sure that that they're getting what they need, basically.
So if you was to go and talk to yourself, the person that took that job at Gillingham Ladies, what would you tell yourself back then?
Go and get educated by Raymond Verheyen.
Yeah.
That would have been 10 years earlier. That's what I'd say to myself.
Right.
Look, the coach education that this country provides coaches, I think, is poor. Really, really, really poor. And it shouldn't be that I've got to go and spend my money learning off somebody who isn't poor, who's a complete polar opposite, you know. But that's probably, I've never had a problem. I've never been nervous. I've never been anything like that. I mean, I reckon when I did my A license, it was full of top footballers, good coaches and stuff like that. And again, I'm not a former professional footballer. So what I realised I had to do on day one, get to know them all, right? Because how it works on these courses, that you're given a topic and you coach it, like, it's a residential thing for a week or whatever, but all the other coaches are your players, And so I said, you know what I'm going to do? Apart from when I'm coaching, I'm going to play in, and I physically couldn't do it, but I did. I played in every single session, right? That I could, apart from my own. And I always remember one, it was, I had to do one, I think it was on the Friday, and we're on the Thursday night, as a guy who's called Paul Tate. He's the under-23 manager now at Everton. He said to me, he went, everybody wants to play in your session tomorrow, and everyone is going to run the balls off for you. And that, for him saying that said to me, I'm doing the right thing, because I'm not an ex-pro, but I made myself available and got to know. I asked questions, are humble, I waited a little bit on my banter, they could handle it. So things like I remember when I met Neil Lennon, right? We'd flown out the day before the second part of the A license, and I flew with a guy who used to play for Palace called Andy Martin, and we got a taxi to where we were staying, and we knew all the lads were down the pub. So we've gone down the pub, and Neil Lennon was at the bar, and my mate has gone, oh, Lenny, this is Hugo. Hugo says, Lenny. I went, oh, hi, Lenny. And he went, do you want a pint? I went, yeah, I'll have a pint of lager. And he turned and handed me the pint. I went, thanks. I said, sorry, what was your name again? To him. And from that moment, I had him. And I got on so well with him just because of me being an idiot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I know that sometimes people like me would never say that to someone like him.
Yeah.
So I'm not afraid to push a boundary or two. The best way I can tell, I know it sounds like I'm name dropping, but the best way that I can describe him, listen, we didn't swap phone numbers or anything like that at the end of the, but we got on really well, right?
Yeah.
My brother-in-law was, a few years later, was flying from Heathrow to Glasgow, and he's messaged me going, I'm stood next to Neil Lennon. I said, well, say hello to him, tell him that you know me, right, as a test. And he said, oh, hi, Neil, my name's Tony. He goes, I think you know me, brother-in-law. And he went, who's your brother-in-law? And he said, it's Hugo Langton. And he said, apparently the biggest smile come on his face. I mean, what, that wee baldy bastard, right? And he made my brother-in-law sit next to him on the flight all the way up there, mate. Listen, what a guy. Yeah. Great.
So talking about your career and stuff, what do you think has been your biggest failure?
There's one that really, do you know what, actually, the end of King's Lynn irked me.
Right.
Because we finished second, 2 points behind the team that won it. So we went into the playoffs. And I've got to be careful how I word this. Like,
yeah, sure.
I knew the last training session, the day before we played the playoff semi-final game, I knew we were done. Yeah. I knew there was no hope for us the next day because I could see how tired we were. Yeah. And what had happened was that we had trained too much during the week and for too long, right? Which wasn't my own recommendation, but I'm not trying to pass but anything like that. Yeah. But I just knew that we were done. And I just hoped that the team we were playing the next day were in a similar situation to us, and unfortunately they weren't. Yeah. We were done. I knew, but I didn't want to say anything because I'm trying to be optimistic and keep everyone going. You know, do you know what I mean? But I knew we were done, and there's so much. In that week, I'd change.
So, what's been your biggest achievement in your career so far?
That I'm still here. That as a guy that started out, no one knowing who I was, right at the very, very bottom, where which was in 2006.
Yeah.
So I'm still here, 17, 18 years on. I've managed or coached in the men's game over 600 games.
Wow.
No, and I want to get to 1,000. Whether I can do that or not in the dugout, I don't include pre-season games in that, by the way. That's literally just league and cup games.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm still here. And I'm like a cockroach. You can't get rid of me.
Are there actual stats actually for every game you've been involved in?
I have always kept my own record.
Okay.
Because my plan was always how far can you go and how many games can you do?
Yeah.
That was my thinking.
So what are your stats then? What are your football stats then in games and
do you know wins? What? I don't know. I've only ever counted how many games.
Oh, okay. Right. Okay. Right.
I would estimate because I've been at some clubs where we couldn't win and other clubs where we were winning all the time. I'd probably estimate it'd be around a win ratio of around 35 to 40%.
That's not bad, actually. As from what I've seen stats-wise in other leagues, that's not bad, actually. That's
And bear in mind, I'm not the manager, so most of those. So, but that's irrelevant. But yeah, no, I want to see. I want to still be around in 10 years. If I'm still here in 10 years' time with 1,000 games, then I'll be happy. I'm not manager, coach. The three things I want to achieve that's left for me, right? One, I would like to coach in the EFL. 2, 1, whatever, right? Secondly, I'd like to be at Wembley. I'd like with a team to play at Wembley. And my third one is that I would like to go to play Gillingham as an away team and beat them. Because so many of my mates will be behind the dugouts giving me dog's abuse. I'd love
Yeah, that would be amazing.
That's my team, Gillingham, but I'd love to go there. Every time I get to the FA Cup first round, it's like, please, can we get Gillingham away? But
well, you might end up being a manager or assistant manager at Gillingham. That could be the next level up.
Never say never, mate. Yeah. But listen, I live in the real world, and I've always known the chances of me getting to league are hard.
Yeah,
because of my background. I have come very, very, very close on 2 or 3 occasions, and something's fallen through at the last second.
Yeah,
that's life.
So you said, football. You mentioned about your proudest moment is to still be in the game. But what's been the best football moment? I guess, like you say, that's probably the thing that I'm the most proud of.
There's loads of them, but again, I'm going to talk about probably the most recent one was the FA Cup first round last year because we were drawn away at Doncaster. So we were step 2. Doncaster were in League 2. So there's 2 divisions between the 2 teams, right? Doncaster at home, especially, they were renowned for having the ball, right? Yeah. We went there and they couldn't get the ball off us, right? We won 1-0, which should have been more. They touched the ball 5 times the whole game in our penalty box.
Yeah,
we were just so good. Like you would have thought we were the League 2 team and they were 2 divisions below, you know. And that was a great moment because there was a lot of Kings Lynn fans behind the goal. You know, the scenes at full time were unbelievable. But it's the same when we won step 2 with Bromley. the full-time whistle, the pitch invasion, it was just things that will stay with you forever, and really nice memories. But that Doncaster one was funny because as the week went on, we genuinely knew as staff and then the players that we could beat them.
Yeah. When we messaged you, I was saying, and again, I then realised the difference in the leagues, and I couldn't believe, one, it was only 1-0. You might remember me saying this in the message, but two, the way you kept the ball, the passing that I saw in that game, and I'm not going to say it's funny, I'll use Barcelona or Man City as an example here, but it was like that in the game with the way that I think it was the amount of passes you did. I don't know if it was to get the goal or there were other chances.
No, you know what? The goal come from a long throw.
Yeah, it wasn't that. But you had another chance, and I can't remember. There was a guy who played for your team, but I was so impressed at how you passed the ball. And I thought, wow.
The thing is, it's funny because I'm having a current argument on Twitter. Well, not an argument. I like to provoke chat on Twitter, as you might have seen, right? And I put up something about coaches getting overexcited and over-enthused by the team putting 30 passes together before scoring. But my argument is, well, if you only need one pass to score, isn't that as good as 30 passes? But the thing is, you've got to remember is that when we played Doncaster, they're a good side, all right? And they were always going to be very compact, everyone in together, but when we had the ball, right? And so sometimes you can't go through quickly, and there wasn't a lot of spacing behind their back line. So sometimes we pass the ball to bring somebody out to find the space. This is all stuff that we worked on, just moving their back line around and creating openings and gaps, and can we bring them a little bit higher up the pitch when they didn't have the ball, or when we had the ball, to create more spacing behind. So, there's a methodology in that, but there's other games, like we scored the goal, was a long throw, and big goal on Mateo, who's 6'5", got his head on it and won the game for us. So it doesn't matter. After all the nice looking passing that we did, it didn't get us anywhere really. But the goal came from a long throw, which got us somewhere. So that's the point, isn't it?
Yeah.
You don't have to. Don't get me wrong. I know if we're winning and we've got the ball, the other team can't score. So sometimes, but the purpose of the game is to score goals, right? The purpose of the game isn't just having possession. And I think a lot of people get confused by that. I hear people going, we lost 1-0, but we had 80% of possession. Well, I'd rather win 1-0 and have 20% of possession.
No, I hear you. And, by the way, for those who haven't seen the goal.
And it is a long one. It's into the danger area and it's in! Oh, and Kingsley Town, goal on Mateo! He gets on that throw from Christian Oxlade-Chamberlain. Gets a header beyond keeper Mitchell. Kingsley Town 1-0. And that is it. That is it at the ECAR Power Stadium. And a famous victory for Kingsley Town against their League 2 opponents. A thoroughly deserved victory.
Unfortunately, you didn't make it to the third round, but like you say, you should be very, very proud.
We had our day in this. We were the main game on BBC against Stevenage. It was a close game, but for 5 minutes, and they showed their quality. In 5 minutes, they scored 3 goals, and you tip your hat to that because they just turned the volume up for 5 minutes, and we couldn't deal with it. And there's no shame in it, anything like that. They were a good side, and they got promoted from the division as well. Remember, so. Good luck to them. And I thought one thing I will say, a lot of people, like Steve Evans is the manager. Steve Evans gets a lot of bad publicity. I'm telling you now, right? During games, he's no different to any of the rest of us. He wants to win a game. He'd kick his granny if it means that you can win a game of football. Yeah. And we're no different to that. And no one is any different to that. But I'll tell you what, right? Away from his dugout, you could not meet a nicer guy. And he gets so much bad press. And and then I'll be honest, it was just after my dad died, and he was so good to me, unbelievably. And to the extent that when he was interviewed on BBC straight after the game, he actually acknowledged my dad.
And I'd quite like to say, before we talk about the game, the assistant manager here lost his father in Medway, so everyone, including our chairman, sends our condolences. So in the game, we were poor first half.
Yeah. And he didn't have to do that. And it had a tremendously positive effect because my mum's watching the game and my sisters and my brother. It had a tremendously positive effect on them. And I know for that reason, what a guy.
So you're now at Aldershot. You're obviously now in pre-season. What's the targets, the goals for you and for the team this season?
You know, you don't really publicly want to put labels on anything, but one thing that we're very conscious of is that, but not a great record at home in the last 2 or 3 years. So the supporters haven't had a lot to shout about on a regular basis by going to the stadium and watching the team win. So that's something that, you know, we would like to try and change. There's no guarantee it, because, you know, this is a difficult league that we're in. You know, I just want to give them a team that they can identify with and feel like associate with. So for me, like, the football club should always be the heart of a town's community. Don't get me wrong, there's other things in the town, but the football club for me, it is a part of the heart of the community where people can go and feel proud to be from that town. And Aldershot's no different. We're aware that it's the home of the British Army. So people, you know, over centuries, whatever, have left Aldershot, gone to war and died. All right, and we're very conscious of that as well. So we just want to give the town a team that they can identify with or feel part of, and obviously try to win a few more games than what they're used to. That's where we're at the moment.
So do you think they're trying to be like Crystal Palace because of their kit?
But we've just signed a former Crystal Palace player, actually, called Stuart O'Keefe.
Right. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and he seems to quite like that kit. So,
yeah, I bet he does. How old is it? How old is Stuart?
Stuart's 32.
How many fans on average go to watch Aldershot?
Again, it depends how they're doing. I mean, they're usually around about, when they've been struggling as well, they get between 1,800 and 2,000, but it should be at least double that.
What was the capacity?
I would estimate it would be 7,000-8,000. I'd estimate.
And as an assistant manager and a manager at clubs like Aldershot, what interaction do you have with fans?
We try to make ourselves available for people. If people want to come talk to us, then they can. You know, at King's Lynn, because of where it was, we'd stay overnight there quite a lot. So we'd wander around the town and stuff, you know. And so, yeah, you know, you don't hide from people. You know, if people want to come and speak to us after the game, you know, have a cup of tea with us, you know, and the upstairs bar, whatever, they're very, very welcome to.
But they don't drink Tino, do they? That's the problem. Most people that go to football obviously having a few beers. And does that sometimes cause you and the manager, probably because people are a bit more braver, people a bit more emotional, especially after the game?
Well, look, we not fans of the club that we've been at, but, you know, we went to the 2 occasions. There was 2 occasions last year, and they were very close to each other. We played away to Telford, and what was behind us was vicious. I've never heard abuse like it. And listen, it's impossible to offend me. And what I listened to for the whole game was atrocious, and a lot of it was aimed towards. We had a female physio at the time, and it was awful. So then the following week we went away to Peterborough Sports, and that's more of a local derby, and you know, we didn't feel safe at the end of the game. You know, because between the security and some local supporters, they were at them. They threatened them. I think one of them threatened to kill Tommy, and you know, we won the game with an absolutely outstanding goal, right, in the last seconds of the game. If you want to put that up, that's Josh Barrett away at Peterborough Sports. It'll be on YouTube. Trust me, that's how you win a local derby, right? What a goal. But we actually felt unsafe after the game. We made sure that we all, as staff, left together to go to the car park to leave.
Wow.
And it shouldn't be like that.
Last couple of questions on social media. That's now, you know, not just in football, but in the whole world. How do you manage social media for players? And also, how do you handle social media for you and the club? You mentioned you had a bit of banter back with somebody on there, but how much? What's the kind of policy in football now?
Well, the way I look at social media is that what I might tweet about is nothing to do with Aldershot Town or whoever I'm working for. Sometimes some people will ask me questions on Twitter, and my replies about Aldershot, and my replies, look, anything that I speak about Aldershot has to come through the clubs of social media, not my own. So I won't do that. The players generally, we just say to them, look, don't divulge anything you shouldn't divulge. Most of the time, they're just putting pictures on Instagram of them, in some kind of duel on the pitch, with a week to the hashtag Let's Go. It's like I wouldn't be surprised if there's a fine on the players' fines list if there's something around social media. I know at Kings Lynn, if a player was photographed with any member of the management team, that they got fined. And I got wind of it, and I didn't pretend that I didn't know. So I always try to make sure at the end of a game I'd grab a player if he was near a camera in the hope that it'd be photographed so he got fined.
Love that. You said fine sheet. There's what are the fines that you get? Like
from the management side, we only have two fines. One is the players have to report in every day by a certain time, depending what day of the week it is. What we call their wellness.
Yeah.
Okay. And swearing the staff.
Right.
That's the thing that we fine them for. So, and we would never dream in a million years of in training if somebody's about to score a goal, blowing the whistle and ending it before the goal's scored in order for them to swear at us. We'd never dream of doing anything like that ever, right? But the players themselves, they've got their own fine. I don't even want to know what's on their fine list.
And who manages that? Like the captain or like senior players?
I don't know.
You don't know.
There's usually some sort of committee. I stay well away from that.
Yeah. And what are the rules as well, Hugo, about like drinking, going out, like in non-league?
Well, look, to be fair, the professional footballers, all right, and their job is to present themselves in the best possible way that they can every time that we see them, all right. So, but they're also human beings, right? So they need to blow off some steam. So what will happen is that generally they'll pick a Saturday after a home game, perhaps, or an away game, depending what city we're in, where they'll go, right, we're going to have a night out here, all right? And it will never be when we've got a Tuesday game, obviously. So they are quite sensible about when they do it, all right? So, but we had a thing last year, the players had they had paid money to go to Winter Wonderland in London on a Sunday. But what had happened after they put the money down, that there was a rearranged game was put in on the Tuesday up near Newcastle. So they planned to go out on a drink all day Sunday, but we had a game on Tuesday. And to be fair to them, they went, but they didn't drink a lot.
Right.
It was that they policed themselves because obviously, you're up the top of the league and you've got to try and stay there, right? So that's where they deserve credit. And I think a lot of the time that I wouldn't describe it. I'd be very surprised if any of them were, big drinkers and often, because you can't do it at the time. Same with us as staff. I mean, because we're always up early and in our cars, we can't drink.
Yeah.
So we've got to be very careful.
Can you tell Hugo though if somebody's had a drink the night before game, not the night before game, but someone comes into training? Don't get me wrong, I know we have a few drinks and stuff, but can you clearly see it in a player that they've?
Look, sometimes it's really obvious.
Yeah.
But do you know what? It's not something that I've seen for a long, long time. I think if a player, if I'm honest with you, if he feels it like that, he'll probably try to feign, my hamstring's a bit sore today, maybe I shouldn't. Right.
That must be interesting, isn't it? Actually, when you've got players, you hear loads of stories from ex-professional players and stuff about getting booked before Christmas or pretend to be injured because they wanted to do. Is it how like you tell your kids and stuff and they go, like, oh God, you don't believe my hamstring goes, and they go, look me in the eyes and tell me that. Are you being serious, kind of thing? But how do you know something being true or not?
Look, do you know why I know that won't happen? Because you put Boxing Day game, trust me, as a player, you want to play in it because it's bigger crowd. It's usually a local rival, and you want to play in them, So and the same on New Year's Day because they're big fixtures.
Yeah.
So I don't worry too much about that, if I'm honest with you. Players, I don't think the way that people are these days. I mean, they're fit, they look after themselves, they eat the right things, they get the right amount of sleep. But listen, I'm not stupid. Everyone now and then, you're going to want a glass they're going to want a glass of something or a couple of pints. That's fine, but don't do it to the detriment of the team.
Yeah,
and they get that, because if they to be fair, if they turn up having a few drinks, and you can tell that the players will probably deal with it themselves.
Yeah, that's good.
They wouldn't be happy.
So you mentioned you got kids.
I've got 2 daughters who are 13. Well, she's 13 going on 20.
Yeah,
and my other one's 10.
So what's been the proudest moment been so far with them both?
Well, look, they're both really, really amazing dancers, and I know that's an easy thing to say because I'm their dad. But they go to a dance school and they compete in around the country in competitions and stuff. Sometimes on their own, sometimes together, but more often they're in what's called a performing group, and this performing group has been very successful.
Oh, brilliant!
And, So they've become national champions at a couple of things, and that's great. And so they were good moments.
So do they like football at all, or do they play it, or is it just dancing is their kind of like?
Yeah, no, I mean, like my youngest has a small interest in it. If they don't come to games very often because they're always dancing at the weekends, but she came. My youngest will get more into it, and things like that. But yeah, she'll start joining in some of the singing and things like that.
Do you ever hear them talking about you to their friends and what you do?
No, not really. I mean, I saw some of my youngest daughter's schoolwork not long ago, and she was building sentences and stuff like that, and she was writing quite a lot about me, which was very nice. I think she sometimes the boys that in her class and stuff, she'll say, "Oh, my dad's a football coach." And they go, "Yeah, but he's not at Chelsea." So yeah, no, they do a little bit. I think it's always nice for my kids when my team's on the telly.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And so we're like with all the shot, because we're covered by BT Sport, wherever it is now. So we'll be on telly quite a bit this season, hopefully. So that's always nice.
Cool. So what are you looking forward to in the future, personally or professionally?
Well, look, as long as everyone around me is healthy, I'm good, and doing what they should be doing, and they're happy, I'm good. See what I mean? I think it's not an unrealistic thing to want, just, you want the people around you and your family just to all to be happy and have a great life, don't you?
Yeah.
So I think now being nearer home with this particular job, it's nice to spend more time with the kids and stuff, maybe have a bit of a social life from time to time, because I just didn't have it at Kings Lynn, just because of the distances. But listen, I'm not moaning about it. I didn't have to do that job, right? Yeah. So I'm not moaning about it. Professionally, as I said to you, if I'm still here on 1,000 games, then I'm good.
What do you like doing for fun?
I walk my dog. I walk my dog a lot. That's nice because where I live, we're lucky. There's a lot of kind of farm green areas and stuff that you're allowed to bring your dogs through, and it's really peaceful. I listen to music still. But yeah, do you know what? I'm just trying to just spend as much time with the whole family as much as I can. Yeah. I try and see my mum as much as I can. Obviously she's on the road now, and you just try to be a nice person, don't you?
Yeah.
And every now and then I might enjoy a pint.
It's one. So, by the way, if you need any music, I can send you some mixes and stuff for your long walks with the dog. And
listen, as I said, I like heavy metal, mate.
True, yeah, true, and that's probably why you lost all your hair, because of like the craziness you have to do with it.
Oh no, I always say I used wash and go. I washed it and went.
Last question: how do you want to be remembered?
I'd like to just be remembered for being a guy who tried his best and tried to defy the odds a little bit. You know, I don't want to be remembered as just an ordinary person, if that makes sense. But I'm not expecting to be remembered for somebody who's extraordinary, but, you know, somebody who's not just another statistic. I'd like people to, but yeah, he made a difference, you know, with with the way that he was around people at football or socially or whatever.
Well, listen, mate, honestly, thank you so much for this.
Thanks for having me, mate.
Before we finish, is there anything that I haven't asked you or you might want to mention? Anything that you might be doing that, you know, outside of what I've asked or said or?
No, listen, no, not at all. You know, it's been, I've really enjoyed it and I appreciate you inviting me on. And yeah, I hope you get some other guests that would be interesting as well, because I'll keep watching them now, mate.
Good luck for Aldershot, and keep wearing that Palace kit. In the future,
it's not me wearing it,
but good luck in the future.
Thank you, Scott, and to you, mate.
Episodes will be available every Saturday, so if you haven't already, make sure you hit subscribe and follow to receive notifications of each of my new shows. Also, make sure you like, share, and comment. Thank you for listening.
The What Why Now podcast with DJ Scottos.